Chapter 13. Mist Off the Lake. Before breakfast the next morning, Chip assembled the occupants of cabin 13 in front of the building. "Boy, oh boy," commented Mike nervously to Rudy. "We're really going to get it. I've never seen the clones so mad as last night coming home on that bus." "I wonder if they've found out they forgot Dave," said Rudy mildly. "You mean they left him at Silver Lake?" cried Mike. "And you knew, and you didn't tell anyone?" Rudy shrugged, his eyes gleaming. "Chip told me to shut up, so I did." "Well, you guys," said Chip, walking up and down in front of the boys like a drill sergeant, "tomorrow is visiting day." "Already?" said Rudy in mock surprise. "Yep," said Chip philosophically. "Time sure flies when you're having fun." There was a half-insane titter from Mike. "Can it, Webster," snapped Chip. "Okay, seriously, guys? Your parents are coming tomorrow and the camp has to look terrific, right?" "Wrong," said Rudy firmly. "If this is a plea for unpaid labor, I want you to know I don't clean." A scowl formed on Chip's face, but with effort he turned it into a big smile. "Oh, yes you do, Miller. You do lots of things. You'd be amazed at what you do." "In other words," said Rudy, "you're planning to use the force to make me help tidy up the camp." "Right," grinned Chip. "Okay, guys, visiting day means the camp is half over. Let's make the second half even better than the first." "It can hardly miss," deadpanned Rudy. "And," added Chip meaningfully, "let's have some of us trying to improve our behavior, shall we?" "I think he means us," Rudy stage whispered to Mike. Mike snickered loudly. "Okay," said Chip. "There's a lot of work to be done around the place. Let's have some volunteers." Rudy's hand shot into the air. "Mike and I volunteer to tidy up the boating dock." Chip laughed out loud. "No chance, Miller. You and Webster are going to work where I can watch you." "There's no trust in this place," lamented Rudy. "No, not since you came along," said Chip. "Come on now. Where are my volunteers?" Rudy's hand shot up again. "Mike and I volunteer to go and test the main motor launch," he offered. "We wouldn't want our parents to have a rough ride or to sink or anything." "No, thank you, Miller," grinned Chip. "Now look, you guys. You're standing here waiting for breakfast. I want some volunteers, or," he glanced at Rudy, "you don't eat." Rudy nodded approvingly. "I'll sweep out the bunk," offered Rudy. "I'll pick up litter in the compound," said Joey. "I'll help clean the mess hall. I'll wash the mess hall windows. I'll supervise the entire operation," offered Rudy. "Come on, Miller," said Chip. "You and Webster are going to scrub our floor." "I don't do floors, windows, or anything else," said Rudy. "You do now," said Chip. "Come on, you guys. Let's go to breakfast." "Look at that," boasted Chip as several of his counselor friends filed through cabin 13. "There's the soccer champion of the whole world. There's the heaviest hitter in baseball. There's the greatest chess player in history. There's the dancing darling of Silver Lake. There's the king of the disappearing act himself. He and his faithful sidekick are scrubbing the floor." On his hands and knees on the floor, Rudy looked up at his audience with a paralyzingly cold glare. Then he resumed his work. Mike just kept on scrubbing, tight-lipped and red-faced. "Yes," said Chip. "I've finally found Miller's weakness. He's afraid of being beaten to death. I just told him about the days when I was my old high school's boxing champion." Pierre laughed. "He could probably knock your head off." "It does your heart good to see him on his knees," sighed Ralph. "What are you going to do now, Miller?" taunted Frank. "Climb in that bucket and sail away?" Rudy stood up and folded his arms. "Gentlemen, Mike and I don't like the working conditions here. We," he pulled Mike to his feet, "are on strike." "Yeah," squeaked Mike. Pierre started to laugh. "You've got a big mouth, Frank, and a big foot to fit in it. You too, Chip." "Miller," said Chip warningly. "We're on strike," Rudy repeated. "We've got to get over to Arts and Crafts to paint some signs so we can pick it." "Arts and Crafts is all cleaned up and closed for tomorrow," said Pierre. "But I'd be happy to open it for you." Hey, whose side are you on? Snapped Chip. Well, that's quite obvious, said Pierre. Now, this is how you handle a situation like this. Miller, Webster, be good Joes and finish the floor. Gee, we'd like to, said Rudy, but it's against union regulations. I'll give him union regulations, hollered Chip, shaking a big fist. Tell you what I'll do, said Pierre. We're working under a tight deadline here, so I'll double your salaries. Oh, well, said Rudy, in that case, the strike is settled. He and Mike dropped down to their hands and knees and continued scrubbing. Chip was dumbfounded. Boy, is Miller ever stupid, he whispered. He doesn't get a salary. Pierre shook his head resigningly. The problem isn't Miller. Visiting day dawned dark and threatening. The air was still and muggy, and clouds hung low over the lake. Frank knocked on the camp office door. Come in, said Mr. Warden. Sir, began the head counselor. I hate to say this, but it looks like rain. I'd guess we'd better cancel the outdoor buffet and serve lunch in the mess hall. Nonsense, my boy, said Arthur Warden jovially. I've seen 100 mornings like this at Algonquian since the days of my grandfather. It hasn't rained once for an Algonquian Parents' Day. It's just the mist off the lake. It'll clear up. But, sir, protested Frank, who had heard a rumble of thunder in the distance. Now, do as I say, reproached Mr. Warden. Set up for the buffet. Yes, sir, murmured Frank. Shaking his head, he left the office. It's still on, he told his waiting crew. Is he nuts? Exploded Chip. We're going to drown those parents. It isn't going to rain, insisted Frank sarcastically. Elias wouldn't stand for it. Oh no, lamented Ralph Deacon. In the middle of a thunderstorm, we're going to have a picnic, and all because it's not allowed to rain on visiting day. Elias's law. Liberation Day, declared Rudy, animated as usual by the thought of leaving Algonquian Island. He was stuffing his things into his duffel bag. I hope my parents are the first to arrive. That way we can be the first to leave. Should I be packing too? Asked Mike. Everyone who is going home today should be packing, said Rudy. Mike strummed on his guitar, which had just been returned to him that morning. Good as new, he commented. It was nice of them to get it fixed, wasn't it, Rudy? They're all heart, said Rudy sarcastically. Remember, if you had smashed up the cabin, you'd have to fix it your own guitar. Mike took out his suitcase and began neatly folding t-shirts. Adam Willis walked in and stared at Rudy and Mike in surprise. Hey, why are you packing? You guys haven't been kicked out, have you? No such luck, said Rudy. Adam laughed. We're hoping our parents will take us home, explained Mike. Adam looked genuinely sorry. Gee, that's too bad. No, it isn't, said Rudy. It's good. It's very good. Adam laughed again. Well, I'll say this for you, Miller. You're a terrible camper. But you're the best camp director we ever had. Rudy stopped his packing and looked at the boy intently for a moment. Even better than old Elias? Heck, said Adam, grinning. That was before my time. He sobered. You know, it's going to be pretty dull here without you guys. Rudy pointed to the suitcase under Adam's bed. Pack, he suggested. Oh, not me. I kind of like it here. Rudy shook his head. And you seem so sensible. Another thing about your leaving, Adam said, playing his last trump card, is that'll make Harold Green so happy. Rudy froze. It almost makes me want to stay. Almost. He rummaged in his suitcase and came out with a marking pen and a piece of paper. Then, in a flowing script which showed that he was as skilled at calligraphy as he was at baseball, he wrote, Betwixt these sheets sleepeth the biggest jerk in Ontario. Eyeing it with evident though unsmiling pleasure, he affixed it with a band-aid to Harold Green's pillow. The launch bringing the first group of parents arrived shortly before 11. By noon, all the parents, brothers, and sisters were on the island enjoying their reunion with the campers. 8-year-old Jeffrey Miller was looking distastefully around the compound. What a stupid place, he announced loudly. Mom, Why did you send Rudy to such a stupid place? Chip, who had been chatting with Rudy's father, turned abruptly and stared at Jeffrey, marveling at his resemblance to Rudy, not only in looks but in attitude. I taught him everything he knows, said Rudy proudly. I noticed, muttered Chip, moving off. Hey, Rudy, piped Jeffrey. How come all the counselors look alike? They're cloned, explained Rudy. He pointed at Frank. From him. A smiling Mike Webster walked over with his mother, father, and younger sister in tow. Mom, Dad, Vicky, I want you to meet my friend, Rudy Miller. Rudy solemnly shook hands all around and introduced his own parents and Jeffrey. Vicky turned large, worshipful eyes on Rudy. Is it really true that you're the best baseball player in the world? Rudy glared at Mike. What kind of letters have you been writing? Mike shrugged. I couldn't write about what a wonderful time I was having, so I wrote all about you. Speaking of letters, remarked Rudy's mother, you wrote us an identical letter every time. Not exactly, said Rudy calmly. The number of days until visiting day varied with each one. Mike leaned over to Rudy. Have you asked them to take you home yet? He whispered. Not yet, said Rudy. I'm waiting until after lunch. Once they've tasted the food here, they'll have a better understanding of why I want to leave. Look, announced Jeffrey loudly. Here come some more of those clone guys. In a group, Frank, Ralph, Jack, Leo, Pierre, and Dave walked over and introduced themselves to Rudy's parents. I sure wanted to meet you, folks, said Ralph. Me too, echoed the others. Susan Miller turned to her husband. The other parents don't seem to be getting this kind of attention, dear. I'm afraid Rudy has been at it again. Has he been behaving himself? Mr. Miller asked Frank. Oh, we wouldn't know anything about that, said Frank quickly. You'll have to ask Chip, his bunk counselor. I was speaking to this Chip, said Mr. Miller, but every time I asked him about Rudy, he changed the subject. Oh, Rudy, exclaimed his mother in exasperation. From the direction of cabin 13, Chip approached. His face beet red, a synthetic smile showing all his teeth. Excuse me, please. I'd like to have a private word with Miller and Webster. Rudy and Mike followed him to a secluded area near the cabins. From his pocket, Chip produced the sign from Harold Green's bed. Miller, did you do this? Yes, said Rudy briskly. Elegant, isn't it? It's downright nasty, said Chip angrily. His parents almost saw it. Well, it should come as no great shock to them, said Rudy reasonably. They all know he's a jerk. They're his parents, after all. Miller, he's yelling, Mom, came Jeffrey Miller's high-pitched voice. The clone is yelling at Rudy. Two of you, exclaimed Chip. 2 Millers. He laughed and walked away, shaking his head. Oh, dear, said Mike's mother. It looks as though our Michael and your boy have been in some kind of mischief. Oh, I wouldn't worry, said Susan Miller. I'm sure that if anything serious, we'd have been notified. What did they do wrong, Mom? Asked Vicky. I'm sure it's nothing too bad, dear, said Mrs. Webster, smiling. The boys are just high-spirited because they're having such a good time at camp. I wonder, said Mrs. Miller thoughtfully, gazing at her sober-faced older son. The Millers look like ordinary people. Nice people, exclaimed Ralph Deacon. But those kids, put in Chip. Did you see the younger one? He's almost as bad as Miller. Shh, said Frank sharply. Mr. Warden's about to speak. Mr. Warden rose and approached the microphone. Greetings, campers and visitors. My name is Arthur Warden, and I'm the camp director. This is Camp Algonquian Island. It was founded 31 years ago by my grandfather, Elias Warden. Dad, why are his legs like that? Asked Jeffrey Miller loudly. Shh, Jeff. Somewhere in that crowd, whispered Chip to Frank. Webster's laughing his head off. Somehow he always gets a charge out of Mr. Warden's speeches. Frank grimaced. I know these speeches by heart, and they're no laughing matter. Our boss could put a stone to sleep. This is the 31st annual Parents Visiting Day, the camp director went on. I invite all of you to join me in our traditional outdoor buffet luncheon. I look forward to chatting with as many of you as possible. Please enjoy yourselves. Everyone turned to the buffet, which consisted of 3 long tables set up in the compound near the mess hall. Lunch was an appetizing display of sandwiches and salads. Cake and ice cream and drinks were being served at a smaller 4th table. "Yuck!" exclaimed Geoffrey Miller, chewing gingerly at an egg sandwich. "Boy, this food is terrible. Rudy, do they make you eat this every day?" Rudy nodded. "Yes, they do. But usually it's much worse. The cook makes a beef stew you could build a mud hut with." "You, Miller, shut up!" The cook stood, arms akimbo, glaring at Rudy and his brother. "Gee, Rudy, everybody knows you," said Geoffrey proudly. Mr. and Mrs. Miller walked up to where Mr. Warden, Frank at his side, was receiving some of the parents. "I'm Edward Miller, and this is my wife, Susan. We're Rudy's parents." They waited expectantly. "How do you do?" said Mr. Warden blandly. "We wrote you a letter about Rudy," said Mrs. Miller anxiously, "about how difficult he can be and how he didn't want to go to camp." Frank turned pale. "There was a letter?" he blurted. Mr. Warden smiled serenely. "Oh, yes, I remember. His school guidance counselor recommended camp. Over-anxious parents." He chided gently. "Your son has been just fine here, as I knew he would be. He fit right in. Isn't that right, Frank?" Frank coughed violently to cover his consternation and swallowed hard. Yes, Miller's, an amazing kid." He turned disbelieving eyes on his employer. "You received a letter about Rudy Miller?" He cleared his throat carefully. "You didn't mention anything." Mr. Warden smiled wisely. "Since the days of my grandfather, Elias Warden, boys haven't changed," he said. "They're all born to go to camp." "Well, I'm glad everything worked out," said Mrs. Miller dubiously. "It was very nice meeting you." Rudy's parents walked away, eyeing Frank thoughtfully. "He knew," thought Frank in a cold fury, seeking out a nearby bench and sitting down heavily. "I don't believe it. There was a warning about Miller and he didn't tell anybody. When Chip and the guys hear about this, they'll throw Warden in the lake." Frank took a deep breath and most of the color returned to his face. Why put the guys through that, he thought. Especially Chip, who had been driven to desperation by Miller's exploits. This was one revelation he'd keep to himself. His mouth full of potato salad, Chip walked over to where Frank was sitting. "Well, the boss was right," he mumbled. "It didn't rain on his buffet." As if timed by some evil force of nature, the sky was rent by a jagged fork of lightning, followed almost immediately by a deafening clap of thunder. Without any further warning, the heavens opened and the rain came in a blinding downpour. "This way, folks," shouted Frank, now fully recovered from his shock and ready to take charge. He had been prepared for just such an emergency. "Into the mess hall." People began scurrying toward the shelter of the building, the Algonquian staff and some of the campers carrying the various plates of food. Chip grabbed the huge platter of potato salad and began to run across the already muddy ground toward the mess hall. Rudy, Mike, and Geoffrey watched as, with a strangled cry, Chip slipped on the wet grass, then tripped over the doorstep, and fell full length into the mess hall, his face buried in the potato salad. The screen door blew shut, closing on Chip's midsection. He lay there, his head in the salad, his legs in the rain. Frank and Dave came running to the door and hauled Chip inside. The awkward silence that followed was broken by a peal of laughter from Geoffrey Miller. This set Mike off, and soon the whole mess hall, campers, counselors, and parents alike, were just rollicking with mirth. Sticky and humiliated, Chip ventured out into the raging storm to go to the wash station to clean up. "I may have been wrong about this camp," piped up Geoffrey enthusiastically. "This is fun." Rudy stared at Geoffrey, and then at Mike. Mike looked back intently. "Man, this is the worst storm I've ever seen," exclaimed Chip. "It's been coming down like this for over an hour." "I've never seen it rain so hard," moaned Frank. "What are we going to do with parents for the rest of the afternoon? Everyone's getting restless." "We sure can't have the soccer game," agreed Chip, gazing out the screen door of the mess hall where all were still trapped by the downpour. The field's flooded. Hey, the field's flooded. There was a stampede of counselors to the door. The field should be wet, but it shouldn't be flooded like that, exclaimed Jack. Look at the water. There must be 15 or 20 centimeters of it, cried Frank. Mr. Warden, where's Mr. Warden? In his cottage, said Pierre. He took off when the rain started. I suppose I'd better go and get him. Elias would have wanted the captain to go down with the camp. He dashed off through the mud and the rain toward the camp director's cottage. What's going on? Called one of the parents. Nothing to worry about, smiled Frank reassuringly. Everything is under control. Under control? Howled Chip. Under control? It's a flood! There was a murmur throughout the mess hall as people began to feel uneasy. Unless I miss my guess, said Ralph in a low voice, that water is spreading in this direction. Rudy and Mike pushed their way to the door. What's going on? Asked Rudy mildly. Get out of here, Miller, barked Chip. We've got enough trouble. We don't need you. The two boys and their counselor stood in open-mouthed amazement as the water came on in a steady, shallow flow. It engulfed the mess hall and continued toward the cabins and other buildings, surrounding them and flowing on toward the lake. It's coming in, shouted Chip. The water had begun to seep in through the door and from under the floorboards. Soon, everyone was up to their ankles in water, and still more was seeping in. Wow, exclaimed Mike in the general excitement. A disaster. A natural disaster. Rudy, our natural disaster. Rudy's studied poker face began to disintegrate. His eyes gleamed, then danced. A smile cracked the veneer of his normally expressionless face. It grew until it extended from ear to ear. Rudy Miller laughed. He put his head in his hands and began to laugh uncontrollably, splashing his way over to the wall for support. Mike was thunderstruck. He had never even seen Rudy smile, let alone laugh. Cut it out, Webster, snapped Chip. It isn't funny. It's not me, Mike protested, almost speechless. It's him. He pointed at Rudy, who was still doubled over with mirth, tears now streaming down his cheeks. Chip stared in amazement. Miller? Miller! Pierre staggered in the door, completely drenched. Did you get him? Asked Frank anxiously. Where's Mr. Warden? Trapped, gasped Pierre. His cottage is in the valley, and the water is up over the windows. He waved at me from the attic. He's okay. But we're not okay, said Frank. What are we going to do? There must be a blockage in the creek, suggested Pierre. If a few of us can get in there and unblock it, the water will eventually either evaporate or drain into the lake. Once it stops raining, that is. Come on, I need 8 or 10 guys. Mike and I will go, choked Rudy. Just counselors, ordered Frank. Chip. Miller was laughing, said Chip abstractedly. Absentmindedly. He would be, said Frank. I always knew it would take a disaster to get Miller to crack a smile. Now come on, we've got to go on and block the creek. A dozen counselors sloshed their way out the door and headed towards the woods. Boy, Ma, exclaimed Jeffrey Miller loudly. Terrific stuff happens here. Can I go to camp here next year? Ah, said Rudy Miller, his poker face resumed. Things are looking up for the desperate flood victims. The sun is shining and Alcatraz is in ruins. Perfect. Mike had long since stopped laughing and had sobered. Our stuff, he lamented. It's going to be ruined. Your headphones, my guitar. Take heart, announced Rudy dramatically, for your guitar has been located, and she's seaworthy. Look. Mike stared. A rainbow swept in a great, colorful arc across Algonquian Island. The floodwaters had begun to recede, and an assortment of books, clothing, baggage, and sports equipment bobbed on the surface, floating out to the lake. Amid the debris floated Mike's guitar, its polished wood gleaming in the sunlight. Atop it perched the beaver, squinting around nervously. My guitar! Exclaimed Mike. Don't complain, said Rudy. That beaver needs it more than you do. Besides, we owe him something. I have a feeling he's the guy who finished the dam we started. I hope the salvage crew picks it up, said Mike. A group of counselors led by Rolf and Jack had stationed themselves down by the dock and were rescuing Algonquian belongings before they slipped away into the lake. "Attention, everybody," announced Frank. "We're going to serve an impromptu supper because the day lasted longer than we expected." There was a laugh from the parents and a cheer from the campers. Frank grinned sheepishly. "Mr. Warren will be joining us later, as soon as we can get him out of his attic." This time the laughter was general, and Frank joined it. "Are we going to spend the night here?" asked Jeffrey hopefully. "Oh no," Frank assured him. "It was just a flash flood. The water's going down, and we'll be able to ferry you to the mainland pretty soon." "Aw, man," said Jeffrey. "I like it here." "And so," said Arthur Warden at 8 o'clock that evening, as the first group of parents prepared to board the launch, "another successful Parents' Visiting Day draws to a close." "What does he mean by successful?" growled Chip to Frank. "That's just his end of visiting day speech," grinned Frank. "He only has one, and it doesn't cover floods." Except for the occasional puddle, all the water was gone, though the ground was still very muddy. "Thank you for coming to Camp Algonquian Island," went on Mr. Warden. "I trust you had a nice day. Goodbye, all." "Don't worry, folks," called out Frank to the parents. "We're okay here. In a couple of days, Algonquin will be all dried out and as good as new. Goodbye, everybody." The Millers and the Websters were gathered in a small group talking with their sons. "Rudy," began Mrs. Miller slowly, "from all your letters and your general attitude, your father and I aren't sure that you're happy here. We've decided to ask if you'd like to come home with us now." Chip, who had been diligently eavesdropping close by, craned his neck to catch Rudy's answer. Rudy stared at his mother, then at Mike, and then back at his mother. It all hit him like a load of bricks. Home? There was no Mike at home. No Harold Green, no Tales of Elias, no clones. There was nothing to do at home except to entertain a pesky little brother. Alcatraz had floods and beavers and irate cooks and bow-legged camp directors, and Chip throwing himself into the lake all the time. Why would anyone want to leave such obvious entertainment just to go home? "No," he said, eyes gleaming. "I don't want to go home. They need me here. You heard the guidance department. It's good for me. I'm staying put." Chip burst onto the scene. "Welcome to Camp Miller. This is just great." He clapped his big hands onto Rudy's shoulders. "Yeah," squeaked Mike, barely audibly. Rudy wriggled out of Chip's grasp. "There's no need," he said blandly, "to become hysterical." Chip laughed. Miller hadn't changed. After all the goodbyes had been said and the launch had left on its last trip, marking the end of an eventful visiting day, Rudy and Mike seated themselves on a very wet bench in the center of the compound. "Well," said Mike expectantly, "tell me, why did you decide to stay?" "Simple," said Rudy. "I haven't escaped yet." "What? You don't think I'm going to admit that Chip and Frank and all those clones kept me here?" replied Rudy. His eyes gleamed diabolically. "Now that they think I'm here to stay, it should be easy to catch them off guard. You coming?" "But," Mike protested hoarsely, "what if we get away?" Rudy shrugged. "Then we score ourselves a point. Come back and try again." Mike stared at him and then collapsed in a fit of helpless laughter.